like it has been made out of scraps of wood. Now, in the process where we are saying like design is a development, it's important that the artisans who are working on it become a part of this process. As you see over here, the drawing that you find on the ply, and you will see some behind me also, these are called chalk drawings. So it is something that the artisan themselves do, and it allows them to understand the project itself. So they will know what pieces go where, how much wood you require, how much, or how do they understand the design. So that's very important for us.
Right.
So,
And the concept, how you're going to work with it, what are the different components and pieces that are there which could join and make the story alive.
exactly. And we work hand in hand. We'll always go back, we'll do a design, and then we'll always go back to the artisans and ask them to sketch it out, to interpret what they understand about it. And then we will take it forward into a prototyping stage where we are able to make things. And there are multiple levels. So we'll go over the prototyping and all of that, and in the
In
next
the
segment.
upcoming, yes.
So as you see, these are all stages. So there would be multiple fit outs where we would be doing at every level. We need to check whether, this is what our idea is, or this is
The
what we are trying to
stability
do.
of the piece.
Precisely. And also the important thing is that the process is always messy. You will never get clean process pictures. And you'd always have to use your imagination. So it's your 99% of your imagination, 1% is what you see. And from there, you have to understand, okay, these are the details, this is how you should feel, this is how the material should be. And you need to keep checking it at various levels to make sure that this is exactly what your final vision looks like. We can go to the next.
You have a prototype of this approach.
No, I don't have that today. It's raining, so we stacked it up.
Uh,
So this is the final product that was produced, and as you can see, the idea was that the client wanted his architecture to be celebrated, and the furniture itself was something which needs to be minimal in footprint, volume, cost, everything. And this is what the final outcome became, is where you can see the spaces of architecture, you can see the elements and they're highlighted, but at the same time, the furniture doesn't make a very, very heavy statement in that area. And it balances out the entire scape.
So the idea is, guys, to have like a coexistence approach to any project that you do, any project. So none of your project like items or design should compete with the other elements that you're working with, that the designer or architect you're working with. So the end result should be like really smoothing, and it should have, everything should have their own importance and to balance it out. So that is what the approach should be always.
And also, it's like, even if you're trying to make a statement, like in this specific piece, we were trying to make a statement. The next one. Yeah, in this one, we are trying to make a statement, but then also the statement should be balanced out. Like it's just not
Right.
saying that just because I'm doing a furniture, it should be the loudest piece on earth, or it should balance out, the story should connect. And I think that is where it becomes more like you shouldn't be a simple vendor to anyone. You should always be a person who understands the entire scope of the design. There would always be someone who has a bigger idea. And then you see how well you can fit your inputs, and how well you can value add, not being loud. That's the important thing. So in this specific series, we were exploring, it's a very modern house in a hill station, and it has amazing views and really great backdrop. But the idea was he wanted a hint of old world heritage in a very modern setting. So the idea was for us to interpret how old chair works, and try a version where we can tweak certain details to make them less ornate or less loud, and yet explore on how we can do old world furnitures also at the same time. Go to the next one. So as you see, it's like a gorgeous setting this whole project had. Okay, now this again is one more piece that we did, which has a very nice story
Story to
behind
it.
it. Yeah. So basically, the client, if you can see this inner piece, This is called a rain tree. So these are the kind of trees that grow wild, and they're called Indian walnut, Asian walnut. They're different walnuts basically. They're not pure walnut species, but they're subspecies, and they're also known as rain tree in different parts of India. So trees grow really big, really fast. They have very big, wide grain structures, and we can really get them in any size imaginable, like 22 feet, 14 feet long, monolithic pieces. So this client kind of found a set of pieces of this, like a set of sister planks, and then his entire furniture idea was conceived around it, and that is what makes it interesting because he had more, hard boundaries and rules that we couldn't change, and he wanted the whole idea to kind of revolve around that set
To
of
preserve piece as it is as much as we could, and
precise.
to have in this space, like have a statement, but then in a much eco-consciously, in a much respectful way, I would say.
Yeah. So his idea was he doesn't want a table which has squiggly edges. Now the solution he gave us was that why don't you put brass and why don't you put some side pieces and you make me a rectangle. And it sounded really funny in the first meeting, but then when we really got back to the drawing board and we're like, oh shit, this is like a really interesting idea that you can actually connect and do something interesting out of it. So the important thing over here is like it was a client communication where he kind of came up with a radical approach to what he wanted, and using that as a design advantage. And we really got this beautiful lines of brass flowing through the table, and it became a piece. It looks very soothing from a distance. It doesn't have jagged edges, but when you go in, there are those details. There are those two, three materials interacting and playing with each other. So this is some of the process on how the thing was made. Like you actually have a complete solid inlay, and then the whole thing was jointed, and then we got the final finish, surface finish that was required. Next. Yeah. Some details of the leg. So the leg was something which we kind of got inspired from a Japanese designer called George Nakashima, and his theory on how how simply supports can be made for a table using wood and making sure that we retain the core idea, and using these thought processes we kind of integrated two three ideas, and that's where the whole concept came about. Can we go to the next one? Okay. So the chairs that go with this table again had the same story, like one single plank of wood, and all the chairs were made from that. So they are all like sister chairs. So if you keep them one after the other, they actually form the complete piece of wood back.
This is
Um,
actually made out of two kind of woods, right? Walnut and rose.
yes. So what you see over here is walnut, or the rain tree, and what you see on the handles is rosewood.
Which
So
are there on
that is
the sides of the side panels of
side
the
of the
table.
tables also. Yeah, yeah. Can we go to the next one?
Yes.
So all the process has been it's a very artisan centric process. We continuously work with the artisans in refining and redefining the styles, and it really affected the final product because they had a lot of inputs on how it can be done, how you can optimize the idea further, and it was a kind of a process which developed as we went along, and it didn't have a answer on the first day. Can we go to the next one? Then comes one more interesting project where we worked on with the client on doing this
The
very simple.
brief of the client was to have a bed sort of a setup, but which is very sleek, which has a very less visual footprint into in the space that we have, and yet make a statement. So this was a bed. This was a swing with like four posters, as you can see. And the most interesting fact of it is the rope that we worked on, and we did a lot of research on it. So, Abhiru, would you like to continue on it?
Yeah,
The rope.
yeah. So the rope was something which the artisans themselves worked on, and the idea was like if you see the rope, it is a normal rope, but then This was completely hand woven at our place, and we actually had someone visiting from Jaipur, and he made sure that he stayed back to get this rope made. And this rope, what they call it, basically is used to tie
Ties
up
the cows,
bulls. Yeah,
bulls and cows.
bulls and cows, and it has a very high strength. It doesn't stretch, and it is something which is purely made from one sec. I think there's last 2 minutes of the session. Okay, done. So
Uh,
the idea was that you kind of okay, Nikhil, you want to say something?
yeah, so we left with last 2 minutes of the session, and all the participants are requested when the session get ended, they can start the webinar again using the same coordinates.
Okay, sure.
Okay, please continue, sir.
So the rope itself had a story, and the client himself wanted to explore this. So the idea is that small things sometimes make a bigger impact, and this was done in such a way that when you sit on the bed or the sofa or the swing, it actually doesn't feel so wavy because it has 4 points of support. And it basically forms a very gentle kind of a structure. Even when you sit on it, it doesn't
It
swing
doesn't have that bouncy, the bounce factor
bounce,
also.
or it doesn't even have a very heavy swing. So it's something where the client can relax on it. It is almost like a furniture and not something which has been so temporarily supported. Okay.
We'll
This was one.
continue. So once we have a new session, then makes more sense, right?
I think so. That would be good.
That makes more sense.
Nikhil, do we have any more time left on this?
No, hardly 30 seconds, so we can start with next session.
Okay,